Every story begins with a sound. For Marcus Hale, it was the quiet click of a door latch at night. He thought it was the house groaning under its age, the frame shifting in the southern heat. But when it happened again and again, Marcus realized the sound was not the house. It was his son. His boy was slipping away into the dark, leaving behind nothing but soft footsteps on cracked wooden floors. Where could an 8-year-old possibly go when the world was already asleep? Marcus worked long days on construction sites, his boots caked with dust, his arms heavy with exhaustion. At 34, he was both father and mother to his son, raising Jaden in a rented house whose walls carried every creak of time. The fridge rattled like a tired engine. The kitchen light flickered with stubborn life. Money was always short, but warmth was never missing. Marcus gave Jaden the small allowance he could spare, believing the boy would buy candy, comics, or pencils to sketch with. That was the rhythm of their day's work: school, dinner, and a quiet bond stitched together in the dim glow of the kitchen lamp. But then Marcus noticed something change. Jaden no longer came home at the usual time. His backpack was clutched tightly against his chest as if guarding a secret. The coins Marcus gave him did not return as candy wrappers or folded pages from the corner store. Instead, Jaden would nod quickly, slip away to his room, and close the door without a word. Marcus tried to brush it off. Maybe his son was simply growing, finding small rebellions of his own. But the thought of danger pressed harder each day. Their town, though lined with modest porches and the song of cicadas, was bordered by an abandoned industrial yard. Rusted fences, broken windows, whispers of trouble. He had seen older boys linger there with cigarettes and sharp laughter, shadows too rough for a child. The idea of Jaden stepping into that darkness filled Marcus with dread. Each evening, the ritual repeated: the faint sigh of hinges, the subtle shuffle of small shoes, the quiet door closing as if someone wished not to be caught. And Marcus, lying awake on the worn couch, felt the weight of a question that clawed at his chest. If my son is not telling me the truth, then what out there is taking him from me? He decided the next day he would leave the job site early. He would be ready. He would follow the footsteps and discover what secret had stolen into his child's life. The choice filled him with both guilt and resolve: guilt for not trusting Jaden, resolve because no father could ignore a door that opened into the night. The story of Marcus and Jaden begins not with anger, but with fear and love tangled together. A father afraid of losing the only family he had left, a boy carrying a secret heavier than his years, and a single door that kept swinging open, daring to be followed. Stay with Heart Stories to see where those footsteps lead. And tell us if your child vanished into the night. Would you chase the shadow or trust the silence? Write your answer in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the truth hidden in the next chapter. Because sometimes the smallest choices: a coin, a step, a door, become the turning points of a life. Marcus would soon learn that trust is not given once, but tested again and again, especially when love must walk into the dark. Marcus Hale left the job site earlier than usual, his hands still stained with the gray dust of concrete. He walked home with one purpose: to find out where Jaden went when the night swallowed him. The house was as quiet as ever, the old refrigerator buzzing its endless tune. Jaden came in from school, polite but distant, clutching his backpack the same way he had for weeks. He took the allowance without question, thanked his father, and slipped away down the street. Marcus waited for a moment, then followed, his boots careful on the sidewalk. The small southern town looked ordinary, but as the sun lowered, shadows sharpened its edges. Marcus kept his distance as Jaden crossed by the corner store. Instead of candy or comics, the boy picked up a few dented cans of dog food and paper plates. He slid coins across the counter, his face serious, too serious for a child. Marcus frowned. His son stepped out, turned left instead of right, and disappeared into a side street that led toward the industrial yard. The warehouse loomed at the edge of town, its windows cracked like broken teeth, its walls stained by rain and rust. Weeds climbed along the chain-link fence, and the smell of old metal lingered in the air. Jaden stopped at a gap in the fence and squeezed through. Marcus followed quietly, his heart pounding with worry. Inside, Jaden set his backpack down. He pulled out the cans, worked clumsily with a cheap opener, and poured the food onto paper plates. Then he crouched, his small voice soft and deliberate. Brownie, Whitey, Blackie. 3 shapes emerged from the dark. Thin bodies, patchy fur, eyes full of both hunger and fear. Dogs that had been abandoned, reduced to trembling shadows of life. Marcus stood frozen. His sons stroked their matted coats with steady hands, speaking with the kind of gentleness a child should have been receiving, not giving away. The animals, though timid, leaned closer to Jaden, drawn to the warmth in his touch. He placed the plates in front of them, smiling faintly as they ate with desperate gratitude. For a long time, Marcus watched without stepping forward. The image before him shook him more deeply than any danger he had imagined. He had feared gangs, mischief, or rebellion. Instead, he found compassion disguised as secrecy. Shame pressed on him for doubting his son, but pride rose higher, threatening to break him apart. Finally, but dawn, he stepped into the dim light, the dog startled, growling low before retreating a few steps. Jaden turned sharply, fear flashing across his face before guilt settled in. He clutched the empty can and whispered, "I've been using the money to feed them." His voice cracked, but his eyes held firm. Marcus wanted to scold him for the risks, for sneaking out at night, for walking alone into such places. Yet in that moment, none of the words seemed right. His son was not running from him. His son was running towards something, an instinct to care, even in places where others only turned away. The night was cool inside the warehouse. The sound of dogs crunching echoed faintly. Marcus looked at his boy, then at the 3 creatures licking the plates clean, their tails wagging hesitantly. In the midst of ruin, Jaden had created a ritual of kindness, a secret sanctuary carved from neglect. Marcus felt the weight of choice settle on him. He could order Jaden to stop, to abandon this hidden duty, or he could step closer, become part of it, and teach his son how to protect compassion instead of punishing it. Sometimes the lessons children give their parents arrive in unexpected shapes. In this forgotten warehouse, Marcus understood something he had forgotten in his own life. Kindness often begins when no one is watching, and when nurtured, it has the power to turn the darkest corner of a town and of a heart into light. The morning after the discovery at the warehouse, Marcus Hale sat in the kitchen, his hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee gone cold. The image of his son crouched among broken walls and frightened animals would not leave him. He had spent the night wrestling with fear and pride, wondering what kind of father he would be if he chose silence. By dawn, he had his answer. When Jaden shuffled into the room, shoulders tense, expecting punishment, Marcus spoke carefully. "If we do this," he said, "we do it safely, not alone." The boy's eyes widened, relief rushing over his face faster than any words could express. That day, they set to work. The garage, once cluttered with bent tools and leftover planks from construction sites, became their new project. Marcus hammered together a small enclosure from weathered wood, his strong arms moving with the precision of years spent on scaffolds. Jaden fetched nails, smoothed blankets over the floor, and laid out bowls of clean water. The animals would no longer eat in shadows. They would have a place, however humble, under the same roof that sheltered father and son. Marcus established rules: gloves for feeding, disinfectant kept close, never stepping into alleys without him. Jaden, though still a child, accepted these terms with the seriousness of a soldier entrusted with duty. He began keeping a notebook, carefully recording how much each dog ate, how their wounds looked, and whether they wagged their tails or shrank from touch. His small handwriting turned the garage wall into a record of care. The neighborhood did not remain blind for long. Some frowned when they caught sight of the Hale garage, muttering about disease and strays, about foolish men raising wild creatures. Yet not everyone disapproved. One evening, Marcus returned home to find a bag of rice left at the door, a quiet gift from an anonymous neighbor. Another day, a handful of new bowls appeared, placed without a word by someone who cared but did not dare to say it aloud. Then came the storm. Rain beat down against the fragile roof. Wind pushed against the thin garage door. The three dogs cowered together, trembling, their fragile bodies soaked despite the shelter. Jaden rushed to the door, pleading with his eyes before Marcus even spoke. He nodded. They swung the garage open wide and ushered the animals in. Blankets were draped across their backs. Towels rubbed their shaking fur. The father stoked a small heater, its orange glow painting the damp concrete with warmth. For the first time, the garage smelled not of oil and rust, but of wet fur and fragile life clinging to hope. In the glow of that storm-lit evening, Marcus glanced at his son bent over the notebook, carefully noting the time, the food, the behavior. Jaden's face carried a concentration far beyond his years, his small hands steady even as thunder cracked above. Marcus realized with a quiet ache that his son was not asking for a hobby, he was calling him into a mission. As the rain subsided, silence wrapped around the garage. Three animals lay breathing softly, safe for the night. Marcus stood with a hammer still in his hand, his clothes damp, his body weary, but his heart stirred by something larger than fear. He saw not just dogs rescued, but the shaping of a boy into someone who understood that care was not an option, it was a responsibility. In teaching his son to build safely, Marcus learned again that true strength was never about control, but about guidance. He had once thought fatherhood meant shielding Jaden from every risk. Yet here, surrounded by shivering creatures, he discovered that fatherhood also meant standing beside a child when compassion demanded courage. The shelter in the garage had grown into a rhythm. Marcus Hale fixed new panels. Jaden Hale recorded daily notes. And the three dogs slowly learned to trust hands instead of fearing them. One afternoon, while Jaden was brushing Brownie's tangled fur, a knock echoed at the door. A volunteer from a small rescue group stood outside, a handheld scanner in his bag. He had heard about the Hale's efforts and offered to check the animals for microchips, explaining that even abandoned dogs sometimes carry traces of their past. The garage filled with a tense silence as the man knelt beside Blackie, the skittish one with scars along his legs. The scanner gave a soft electronic tone beep. Marcus and Jaden exchanged startled looks. A code appeared, linked to a registry. The volunteer made a call, and within minutes, a name surfaced: Dr. Gabriel Whitmore. The name struck Marcus like a hammer. Gabriel, a veterinarian, now running his own practice. But once more than that, he had been Marcus's first love. The man he had walked away from in order to marry quickly and prove himself to a world that had no patience for men like him. Years had passed, marriages had crumbled, and secrets had hardened into silence. Yet here, through the thin body of a stray, the past had found its way back. When Gabriel arrived in a weathered pickup, his presence filled the driveway with quiet gravity. He stepped from the truck, carrying nothing but calm eyes and a gentle voice. Seeing Marcus, the years seemed to dissolve. For a moment, neither man spoke. The dog stirred restlessly until Gabriel knelt, whispering with practiced ease, his hands steady, his voice low. Blackie inched forward, recognizing an old bond. Jaden watched with curiosity, sensing something deeper between the two men. When Gabriel finally looked up, his gaze settled on Marcus with the weight of unfinished words. Marcus swallowed hard, then spoke softly. "This is my son, Jaden. This is someone I once loved." The words felt both foreign and freeing, a truth carried too long in silence. Jaden's small hand reached out, not to question, not to judge, but to connect. He took his father's fingers in one palm and Gabriel's in the other. His voice, steady and innocent, cut through the years of regret. "Then maybe we can save more than these three. Maybe we can save others too." The garage no longer felt small. It felt like the beginning of something wider, as if walls had opened to allow the past and future to breathe together. Marcus stood rooted in the moment, realizing that hiding himself had cost years, but honesty had returned with the simple courage of a child. The faint beep of a scanner had unearthed more than a name. It had exposed how love, once buried, never truly disappears. In revealing himself to his son, Marcus understood that teaching honesty was not about words spoken at the dinner table, but about lives lived without fear. Jaden's acceptance was the clearest proof that children learn not from perfection, but from truth offered without disguise. The weeks that followed Gabriel Whitmore's return reshaped the lives of Marcus and Jaden Hale. What began as 3 trembling dogs hidden in a garage slowly grew into a plan with structure and purpose. Gabriel brought not only knowledge but also connection. His years as a veterinarian meant he could guide them through vaccinations, simple treatments, and the fragile balance of caring for more than just one animal at a time. Marcus, with his hands hardened by construction, began to design sturdier enclosures, fencing off corners of the yard they had rented at the edge of town. Jaden, notebook and always in hand, managed records with the determination of someone who had found his calling. The garage soon overflowed with supplies, bottles of disinfectant, blankets folded in stacks, bowls neatly lined against the wall. The neighbors who once whispered behind curtains now offered quiet contributions. A sack of nails, a wooden plank, a bundle of towels, each gift anonymous. Each one proof that kindness could spread in silence. A local fundraiser helped them lease a small, neglected patch of land. Together, the 3 of them transformed it into something entirely new, a temporary shelter where the unwanted were finally seen. Marcus painted the fence with his son, while Gabriel measured out pens for feeding and isolation. Jaden carefully wrote feeding schedules and vaccination dates, pinning them to a weathered board they had rescued from the garage. Their evenings no longer belonged to television or silence, but to the rhythm of barking, feeding, and the steady beat of hope. It was Jaden who gave the shelter its name. One evening, as the last light of the sun dipped below the horizon, he pointed to a lone star glimmering in the sky. "Every night I see one," he said. "Even when it's dark, there's always a star that looks lost." That's what they are. Lost stars. So this place, it should be Starry Haven. Marcus and Gabriel exchanged a glance that carried more weight than words. The name was simple, but it carried everything: the nights of secrecy, the storm that brought them together, the courage to stand in the open. And so a hand-painted sign rose above the fence, declaring to anyone who passed that a haven had been born. One built not from wealth or power, but from persistence and love. Life at Starry Haven was never easy. The work was constant, the costs endless. Yet it was no longer only Marcus carrying the burden of family. Jaden had 2 adults beside him now, and Marcus no longer hid the truth of who he was. Gabriel was not just a visitor, he was family. Standing at Marcus's side with the quiet steadiness of someone who had been waiting for the chance to return. The final image of that chapter was simple: 3 pairs of hands, one large, one smaller, one steady resting on the wooden gate of the shelter. Behind them, tails wagged, bowls gleamed in the lamplight, and the sound of life replaced the silence that had once haunted their nights. The lesson hidden in this journey was never about dogs alone. It was about the courage to follow compassion even when it leads into broken places. About how love, when admitted openly, can mend not only families but entire communities. What begins with one act of kindness can ripple outward until it reshapes both past and future. And now their story opens again. A truck pulled to the roadside, its doors swinging open, and 2 thin dogs stumbled toward the gate. Jaden looked up with steady eyes, and Marcus asked softly, "Shall we begin the night shift? The answer is yours too. If you believe even the smallest bowl of water can save a life, what would you name a shelter built from kindness?" Share your thoughts below. And if you want to see more stories of courage, family, and second chances, subscribe to Heart Stories so Starry Haven can keep its light shining in the chapters to come.